Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be talking about Fredbear's singing show, and I will give my theory on what I believe Fredbear's singing show is, and what exactly its implications are on the timeline. So allow me to begin. There are only two mentions of Fredbear's singing show. The first mention we ever got of it was in the black and white advertisement, which features Fredbear in a pie-eyed and rubber hose animation style of drawing, reminiscent of the animations made from the 1920s to the very start of the 1940s. And it advertises the attraction as Fredbear's singing show, with the general admission via tickets being only for 50 cents. And talks about how it's a bear that could sing, food, drinks, entertainment for the whole family. And the second advertisement can be found in the recently released video game Five Nights at Freddy's: The Secret of the Mimic, where we could find a record, an advertisement record, advertising Fredbear's singing show. So there were at least promotional radio ads made for it. Now here's where I begin. I'll talk about what it could possibly be. Sewell has been clearly pushing us towards the past, and they're trying to get us started on what exactly the origins of Fazbear Entertainment are and how it all begun. And of course, they brought up Fall Fest, first with Fall Fest '83, but now with Fall Fest 1970. And so I believe that Fredbear's singing show was the original version of everything, and it began at Fall Fest, as it's particularly Fall Fest 1970, as 50 cents in 1970, adjusted for inflation to modern times, is $4.21. That would be pretty reasonable for a sideshow attraction at a carnival or circus, which Fall Fest could be easily compared to. And it mentions tickets, that this is something you buy a ticket for, and events like these, you get tickets, you win tickets, you spend tickets, stuff like that. Some attractions, some places have it so entrance is free, but you have to pay for each ride and each attraction and stuff like that. An established and permanent the building would say tickets unless it was a movie theater, but this isn't a movie theater. Or they would say your entry fee or booking. You have to book a party or something like that. But no, it says specifically tickets. So this is most likely part of it. And since clearly still trying to push us to the past and make an emphasis on Fall Fest, and they bring up now Fall Fest 1970, and we've seen Fall Fest 1983, and by then Fazbear Entertainment was already long and existing. We know by 1979 they were already around and already working on Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So the origins of it had to have been from before 1979, and your Fall Fest is like this local rural kind of event, for the people of Hurricane, because back then it was was not as big as it was nowadays. Still not exactly that big, but still, it was even smaller back then. And so this is the only other year we have besides '83. It makes logical sense that the Fredbear's singing show began in 1970. Now, what exactly would have been the bear exactly? It was definitely not a real bear, because come on, it doesn't make any sense really. Yeah, because if it was a real bear, they would have drawn it as like a realistic looking bear, like maybe more emphasis that this is an actual like grizzly bear that can sing, but it was a very cartoony, animated looking bear. And so most likely, given also what these guys do, it was more likely just one of them in a costume. So it'd be strange if they transitioned from a real bear like those ye old circus acts to costume characters. So it's already probably a costume character in the beginning. And this could possibly even be from Edwin Murray in his costume manner, because by 1979, they already have had a established relationship. Not a good one, because they conned Edwin out of everything, stole all ideas and stuff, but so they already had a pre-established relationship, and were already working for him. And so, since we know he does make costumes for people, and if you will go to him, you say, hey, can you turn this thing into a costume for us? If people pay for it, then it would make logical sense. And they would do. Then it just makes logical sense that by the time Secret of the Mimic happened in 1979, they were having a serious relationship, so it could have easily started back in 1970 for Fall Fest. Now, in it, Fredbear is called Freddy near the end, but Fred is just a shortened version of Freddy. Sometimes people named Fred are even called Freddy. Yeah, I know a guy who's got Fred in his name. I call him Fred and Freddy all the time. Heck, I even call him Fredbear sometimes. So, this base, and of course, color printers were common until like the late 80s, early 90s. And this is 1970. And this was probably where it all began. This was definitely where it all began. So they're just some average, Joes, normal fellas. So they would not have had the money to buy a color printer. They would have had these rules available at their hands, which would have been, well, black-white printers. Now, why is it in black? Is the art style all old and stuff, archaic? Well, there could be a myriad of things. Maybe they just like to draw them that way, Maybe they just thought that was a good way to draw it, because they probably grew up watching those old cartoons. Given how old they'd be, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that they grew up watching those old cartoons, because those Looney Tune cartoons, the Fleischer cartoons, those were aired on TV during the 50s, 60s, so a lot of people who may not have been alive in the golden age of animation in the 20s, 30s, and 40s were not young enough to have seen them, would have still had a good chance to see them. So there's a good chance they could have still been able to see it, probably influenced their way of drawing, their art style, that inspired them to draw like that. And thought they should draw Fredbear like that, because they thought it was cool. Or that's what they grew up watching. Of course, William to a lesser extent, because he probably grew up in England. Because by the time we see him in his sister location, he still speaks with a very clear British accent. And given my timeline, that investor meeting probably took place like in the late 80s. So he's probably raised and lived in Britain for some time. So it's probably Henry who grew up watching cartoons, maybe during that time period. So that could easily be the explanation to why Fredbear looks the way he does. Very outdated for even 1970. They just thought it looks better in that way, and they are influenced by what he grew up watching, which very well could have been those cartoons which were syndicated and rerun on television channels as part of Saturday morning cartoon programming. That's why Fredbear looks the way he does. And of course, again, it would have had to have been successful to evolve into what it is now. And of course, that radio advertisement could have been from a later one, 71, 72. Maybe even 70. They were really putting all of this into this. They really believed the idea. They put all into that. And he could even become the star. Maybe later he became the star attraction, and eventually decided, let's put him somewhere permanently. Let's give him a rabbit friend. Let's make some other guys. Hey, remember how we called him Freddy? What if we made Freddy another character? Because maybe some people were like, well, Freddy, I thought he was Fredbear. And they're like, Freddy is his own person. It could have been like that, easily. And so we can see now that this is the idea. Hurricane, Utah, in the fall of 1970, they have an annual event called Fall Fest. And two guys, one Henry Emily, and one British man named William Afton, got together and decided to make an attraction there. Got a furry costume of a yellow bear from a guy named Edward Murray and his company, who were known by that for making stuff like that, for making costumes for companies, and they had him perform there, sing and dance. It was probably William doing it, from what we know about him. Probably him. And it was successful. People loved it. And he probably came back for the next year and the next year after that. And eventually decided to expand, make a permanent place, and make Fredbear's Family Diner. They already knew, everybody at Hurricane probably already knew him by then. They'd probably gone there, given the place was probably fairly boring, especially back then, And that's how it all began, In 79, they took Edwin's everything, took his house even, and if you believe the theory that's the after house, makes sense, like it really does make a lot of sense. They took his house, they took his company, and heck, if you're even that crazy enough to believe it, you might even believe they took his kid. That's basically what I believe happened. So I hope you all had a good time, ladies and gentlemen. Now see you all around sometime later on for another theory video. So bye, have a nice time.